I'm Antoine Griffin, the Chief of Staff at the U.S. Small Business Administration, and I'm honored to be joining you all here for day 2 of our National Small Business Week virtual summit. Today, we'll be kicking off our observance of Hispanic Heritage Month by recognizing and talking a little bit about Support Latino Business Day. And we're going to do that with some of the great mayors who are leading the charge. At the SBA, we're proud to be supporting small businesses through programs made possible by the American Rescue Plan, like the Paycheck Protection Program, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, the Shuttered Venues Operator Grant, and our COVID Economic Disaster Injury Loan Program. But truth be told, it's leaders on the ground in cities like yours that are ensuring that local small businesses have access to these and so many other resources to not only survive, but hopefully thrive coming out of the pandemic. With that, I'd like to start with a few questions and open the conversation to some of our great mayors. Today, I'm happy to be joined by the Mayor of Austin, Texas, Mr. Steve Adler, the Mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, the Mayor of Chicago, the Honorable Lori Lightfoot, and our good friend, Regina Romero, Mayor of Tucson, Arizona. I'll start the Q&A by posing a question to Mayor Adler of Austin. Before becoming mayor, we know that you were also a successful business owner. Mayor Adler, how does that shape your approach to supporting small and local businesses through policy?
Well, it's great to be with you. It's great to be here with a group of mayors that I just have so much respect for and in support of Support Latino Business Day. Yes, before I was mayor, I did own a small business. And when you're in that position, you are real sensitive to the special challenges that are faced by small businesses from a competitive standpoint, from a visibility standpoint, from an access standpoint, and you see that those challenges, perhaps even easier for me than for many people in our community. I understand the importance of small businesses. I know that they're the engine in our city. Vast majority of the workforce in our city works for small businesses. We're so reliant on that. It's kind of in our culture, or kind of a startup culture in the city, to really put an emphasis on small businesses. And in our city, the small Hispanic business is critically important. You know, Texas is home, I think, to 18% of the Hispanic-owned firms in the United States, and little Austin by itself, almost 2% of all the Hispanic-owned firms in the country. I think that Austin as a city is in 5th place, just behind four others, and well ahead of the other cities in Texas. Hispanics in our community, 24% of all new entrepreneurs, which is a number that is growing. The business is growing at a higher rate than the population is growing, especially among Hispanic women and the small businesses that they own. You know, it's we're just seeing as the demographics change. We're seeing the energy, the power, the resources, the contribution to the culture and texture of our city. That is small businesses generally, but Hispanic businesses in particular.
Thank you, Mayor. Really appreciate that, and thanks for your insight. Next up, we have the incomparable Lori Lightfoot, Mayor of the Windy City, Chicago, Illinois. Mayor Lightfoot, becoming financially independent is one reason why many small business owners start their own firms. In many communities, especially the Latino community, starting a business comes in part out of a feeling of necessity. What advice do you have for small business owners who might still be struggling getting through the pandemic?
Well, I would say a couple things. And again, a pleasure to be here with my fellow mayors for this important conversation. It's very timely, as you know. Many small businesses were really decimated as a result of the pandemic. That's why we started very early on and put together a $100 million small business resiliency fund. And then we added to that to really focus on micro businesses. We were looking in my city at those businesses that were not going to be served by the federal PPP program. And when you're talking about a lot of small businesses, particularly small businesses owned by people of color, by women, veterans, they may not have a long established relationship with a bank that gives them a line of credit. And one of the things that I know from my experience, and particularly at a time when I worked in the city's procurement department, is that access to credit is really, really challenging. So one of the things that we've done both pre-pandemic and then really leaned into this heavily during the pandemic is a couple of things. One, making sure that we were giving as many grant programs as possible. Historically, the city of Chicago had given matching grants, but if you don't have $100,000 to match the grants that you're getting, it's as if you're getting nothing. So we converted a lot of our programs to pure grants, but what we also found from listening to small businesses is that we needed to provide them with technical assistance to be able to apply for the grants, but then also to be able to execute on the back end once they receive funding from the city. So making sure that we're giving kind of 360 wraparound services to our small businesses and not just pushing money out the door, I think has been very, very successful to us. And then obviously we got to keep listening. Our small businesses are still experiencing a lot of pain points. We're trying to deregulate a lot of the hoops that we were making small businesses go through. For example, and this is going to sound probably absurd to the other mayors, but it could take anywhere from 6 months to a year to get a sign when you were a small business opening up. You know how critical it is to have a sign that says, here's who we are, we're open for business. So we have streamlined that process exponentially. We've just got to be very close to our small businesses. Our department that really focuses on small businesses has held hundreds, literally hundreds of seminars to help them understand what the different changes were going to be to capacity limits, masking rules, and so forth, but also use that as an opportunity, working with the small businesses, working with our chambers of commerce across our city to give us feedback on what their needs were so we could be even more responsive. But I would say to small businesses, certainly here in my city, and I know I'm speaking for the other mayors here, we want to be your partners. We know that small businesses are the backbone of our economy. People hire from the neighborhood, they're mere presence in neighborhoods, is a stabilizing force. So we've got to do everything that we can to really support and promote small businesses. And we're really focusing on all aspects of that in partnership with the small business community.
Thanks, Mayor Lightfoot. Really appreciate that, and really appreciate everything you all are doing to make it easier for businesses to operate and thrive there in Chicago. Mayor Romero, first, thanks again for being here with us today. Now, I understand your mother and the first Latina mayor of Tucson, which means you're uniquely qualified to understand the struggles particularly working mothers face, especially those leading their own businesses. Can you talk a little bit about how we can better support Latina entrepreneurs, and any particular advice you'd give to working mothers or those leading their household as well as trying to run a business at the same time?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the invitation, and it's an honor and pleasure to be here with my wonderful colleague mayors, Mayor Lightfoot, Mayor Adler, and Mayor Garcetti. You know, here in Tucson, Arizona is very similar to all of the cities throughout this country. First and foremost, Latinas get paid 55 cents on the dollar of every Caucasian male. That has to change. And that's for a woman that has either is a head of household or recently graduated from a university. It's an unfair platform that we start in when we're starting our careers. When we're wanting to start our own businesses, the most important thing that we can do, as Mayor Lightfoot said, was to be able to have access to credit and capital. And if the cities throughout America can join in with small businesses, and I would echo what Mayor Lightfoot said, that the city of Tucson wants to be a good partner to our small businesses. And what we did here in Tucson because of the pandemic, because of City of Tucson receiving CARES Fund directly, we created a We Are One Somos Uno Resiliency Fund for our small businesses, for working families, and for nonprofits, where we put both public and private funds to be able to support our small businesses. And in creating the Somos Uno Fund, we understood how difficult it was for our small businesses to tap into the PPP federal loans. And so we decided as a mayor and council that we wanted to invest, of the $95 million in CARE funds that we received, we wanted to invest at least $10 million in grants. Simple to apply grants so that our small businesses could survive. And so being able to offer those anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000 grants to make it easier for small businesses to survive throughout the pandemic. And then we created small business navigators so that the City of Tucson could help our small businesses navigate this pandemic and connect them to whatever resources that they needed, both on a business side and on a personal side. Because what we found out is that small business owners, mostly led by Latinas, they were having problems with, of course, just like any other parent had during the pandemic, offering the assistance that their children needed to get them to school virtually. So we dealt with their issues on their personal side as well. So kind of wraparound services. Childcare, we started funding childcare. We put $2 million worth of CARES Act money into childcare and connected them to that. We put $6 million into workers and their families, just a $2,000 grant so that they could pay their bills. And then, of course, offered hotspots and Wi-Fi for their children in partnership with our school districts, so that their children could continue going to school and connecting to their classrooms virtually. So access to capital is very important as we move forward. Childcare benefits, so that they could focus in their businesses. And as we well know, small businesses especially put so much of their time and effort into trying to make their businesses succeed. And then, of course, making sure that our small business navigators, our City of Tucson, is offering them connections or connecting them to other services through the SBA, through the state of Arizona, and connecting them to our credit unions or our business development finance corporations, which are nonprofits that lend to these businesses. All those efforts, working in partnership with the SBA, the federal government, the state of Arizona, our county government, and the City of Tucson. That's how we can push small businesses forward throughout our communities.
Thanks so much, Mayor Romero.
Thank you.
Welcome, Mayor Garcetti. Appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much, Antoine, and thank you for helping us celebrate Small Business Week and in particular support Latino Business Day. We're so proud to be a part of this in Los Angeles in all of its rich diversity, and thanks to you for all your efforts as well.
Los Angeles has been a supporter of Support Latino Business Day from day one. Why is it important for you, either personally or as mayor of LA, to help close the gap for our Latino business owners? And how are you supporting them in the second year of the pandemic?
You know, for me, this is very personal, and it's not just about one day. It's about 365 days of the year. I literally wouldn't be here today as mayor of the second largest city in America were it not for Latino ownership, business ownership, entrepreneurship. My grandfather, my abuelo, was an immigrant from Mexico, born in Parral, Chihuahua, and carried over the border as a baby by his mother because of the Mexican Revolution. But he was able to get not only a life here in the United States, but to start a small business. First working as a barber, but then owning his own barber shop that he and my grandmother opened up. And it was because of that, they were able to help my father and his sister grow up in Los Angeles and South Los Angeles, become the first in their family go to college. And now the grandson of that immigrant is here giving back to the same communities that first gave my grandfather the opportunity. So this is a story each one of us can tell in immigrant families around America. And for Latinx families in particular, we see the power of local businesses now, where we see, for instance, about 34% growth with Latinx small businesses compared to about 1% for non-Latino businesses in the United States. We now comprise in sales, all of our businesses collectively, about $500 billion in 2019 sales. So this is personal for me as the grandson of an immigrant, as a mayor of a great American city, and also just as an everyday American that wants to see us bounce back from this pandemic stronger than ever. The problem is, despite the numbers that I just said, is that the average Latinx business gets about half of the receipts that a white-owned business in America is. So there's a lot of room for growth. We've seen double-digit growth, but we need to catch up still with that gap. We often lack access to capital. We often lack access to technology. And so this is an opportunity for us to build our markets, to build our connections, and to build our network. Because when Latino businesses succeed in America, America wins.
Back to Mayor Lightfoot. Back in March of 2020, Chicago was one of the first major cities to announce big commitments to the small business community. You referenced some of those in your earlier question. Grants, streamlining a lot of, cutting out a lot of the red tape, quite frankly, for businesses. Talk a little bit about the successes you're seeing. And now that we're going through what feels like another wave of the pandemic with the Delta variant, what work remains to be done, and especially in the Latino community?
Well, we're obviously now at a different place in the cycle of the pandemic than we were in those really early and I would say scary days back in the spring of 2020. We know a lot more. The vaccine is available. So we've really, I think, provided support to the Latinx business community and other businesses of color in a couple different ways. At the beginning, as I said, we stood up this $100 million small business resiliency fund to make sure that we could get resources. We really placed a significant emphasis on equity and inclusion. So well in excess of 50% of the monies that we put out the door in the various initiatives were given to businesses of color. We were very intentional about that because we were looking at the places and the gaps where PPP was not going to be covered. We called that the businesses that were unbanked, whether they had a banking relationship or they had no banking relationship, and we're really working on a cash basis. We wanted to make sure that we were responsive to them, but also specifically with respect to the pandemic, a lot of these businesses were scrambling to adapt to the new normal and make sure that they had mitigation efforts in their businesses to protect their employees and protect their customers. So, for example, one of the things we did was we set up a PPP exchange so businesses could get access to this necessary equipment, but do it at a competitive rate, not paying some of the outrageous numbers that we were seeing early on in the pandemic. And again, that initiative was really specifically geared towards small businesses. In addition, providing them with that critical technical experience, and like what Mayor Romero was just talking about, these business navigators, hosting webinars, going out into the community, empowering the local chambers of commerce. I think we've seen a lot of progress, but we know that businesses are still hurting. One of the biggest challenges right now that all of our businesses are facing, as small businesses, to be sure, is a shortage of workers. So we just hosted a 5-week, we call it Hire Chicago, but it was a virtual job fair. Each week was a different industry sector. We started out with manufacturing, we did TD&L, we did healthcare, we did hospitality, and so forth. And again, that was about connecting up job seekers with employers. and not just through a virtual portal, because frankly, in this day and time, people want to know that there's a human on the other side of a portal. So one of the things we also did is provide those job seekers with skills workshops before they even sat down, if you will, with an employer. We helped them really highlight what their experience was, improve their resume, gave them tips on how to interview. So making sure that that pipeline for small, medium, and large sized businesses was really connected up with them. But it's still a challenge. Every industry that I'm aware of in our city, and I think this is a national challenge, we're seeing a shortage of workers. So we've got to do everything we can to keep supporting those small businesses and making sure that they've got the resources, the financing, but also the employees. And the last thing I'll say is, obviously, we've done a lot to make sure that we're providing access to the vaccine to these small businesses and their employees. The only way you can provide a safe workplace in this day and age is to make sure that everyone involved is vaccinated. So we've gone, and again, listening to the businesses themselves, what can we do to help educate your workforce, to make sure the vaccine is widely available, and it is now, and to make sure that we're disabusing people of all the disinformation and the myths that are out there. We want to make sure that not only do our small businesses survive financially, but that they're thriving through the pandemic. And the only way to do that is making sure that we're partnering with them on all the public health mitigation efforts and keeping them up to date and educated. And I think we've done a pretty good job with that here in Chicago.
Mayor Adler, Austin is known for having strong local business community, as evident by in a diverse community, I might say, as evident by your tagline, "Keep Austin Weird." What has Austin been doing to support their local businesses during this next wave of COVID?
Well, obviously, this storm has just been devastating. I mean, the virus has come in, and it's not only created a huge public health crisis, but as Mayor Lightfoot said, the impact on businesses has just been devastating. We also trying to get economic support out. We have created an Austin Small Business Relief Grant, recognizing that the direct payments coming from the federal government were not always accessible, and certainly we're competitive, and the demand far exceeded the resources that were there. We did create the Army of Navigators to hopefully have Austin businesses compete for those funds that were being nationally sought after. But we created our own funds here in the city. The one we did, that Small Business Relief Grant, was so successful that when we got the next round of our American Rescue Plan dollars, there was a call for us to start that up again, and we did, trying to focus on those businesses that hadn't been able to make the cut the first time around. You know, in some of these programs, we're not only making the grant money available, but almost as a condition to get the grant money available, bringing in teams of professionals available in our community. We're talking about, you know, the expensive lawyers and the CPAs in our community that a lot of small businesses don't have access to, and hiring them to as a city to give their high level expertise to a lot of small businesses. To make sure that we were not only giving immediate relief, but we were also putting them in the position to have greater expertise to renegotiate leases and workouts and things that would hold them instead for the next 5 years, and not just the next 5 days or the next 5 months. And then separate from the grants, we put in a pretty strong eviction moratorium in our city. To protect people, but to protect people not just in their homes, but small businesses, especially focusing on restaurants and other kinds of business establishments that were hit hardest during the storm, clubs and the like, so that they were also protected during this period of time. We focused on childcare, recognizing that a lot of these small business owners need to go to work. They don't have the ability to do everything from home. So what could we do to help facilitate in a community that is already strapped with the virus and a reduction of services across the board? How do we make sure that those much needed services are available specifically for those small businesses that are going to need that? So we prioritize childcare as one of the top 3 priorities as we were moving the American Rescue Plan dollars out. We also have our regular business programs that, quite frankly, some of the businesses that hadn't sought them out before were now seeking them out. So our BizAid, business orientation programs and the like, were able to provide support and help as they do on an ongoing basis, but ever the more important here. And I would just add that, it was not just a one-way street. During this virus, some of our most trusted voices in the community with respect to testing and vaccinations are this community of leaders, of small business leaders, and we have leaned on them to really use their connections and their status in the community to help make the overall community that much safer.
Mayor Romero, the Latino community has been on the front lines of this pandemic in many cities, and Tucson is no exception. City made up of at least 40% Latinos and home to over 50,000 Latino-owned businesses. What are you hearing from business owners in your city, and how can we, the federal government, as well as state and local government, better support them?
What we've been hearing, and we have been very aggressive to help protect our residents here in Tucson. We were one of the first cities in Arizona to call an emergency for COVID-19. I had to unfortunately as mayor call an emergency, and one of the first things that we had to do was close restaurants and entertainment venues. Unfortunately, our business leaders were very supportive of our efforts of protecting our community from COVID-19. But what we did was that we acted very creatively. We had a campaign to encourage our residents to order and pick up from restaurants and their small businesses. We made special parking spaces, and especially in our downtown and urban areas, we created special parking spaces for people to park for free to pick up their food or their groceries. We launched a streetery program where we used public right-of-way to create outdoor dining and eating spaces. We're going to continue that program and make it permanent because we felt it was so successful. We also tapped into our federal government funds, which were of course our CARES funds that we put into our grants, and extended our relationship with our congressional offices to make sure that we were tapping into any federal funds that we can bring in to our small businesses here in the city of Tucson. And so we had to think creatively, and now because we're still in this pandemic, we've extended the programs that we created during the pandemic. We also, as Mayor Lightfoot had mentioned, partnered with our Resiliency Fund, our Somos Uno Resiliency Fund, with the YWCA and the Women's Business Center, so that we could continue putting funds out and grant funds out to our small businesses focused on women, communities of color and veterans and those vulnerable communities that didn't have access to PPP loans or were underbanked. And of course, we have to take the resources to the businesses. Businesses and the small business owners work 18 to 20 hours a day. I mean, it really are, these are hardworking communities. And so we have to take the resources to them. Many times an email doesn't work with information. So what we did was partner with the chambers of commerce and the women's business centers that would take flyers of information to the doors of the small businesses, bilingually, by the way. So we have to be able to meet the small businesses where they are. And we did virtual roundtables so that we could hear from them. My office could hear from them what their needs were. And yeah, so it has been an adventure, but we've learned a lot along the way, and some of the creative things that we had to do, we're going to expand into the future, and hopefully we can continue offering funds and access to capital and the services, the wraparound services that small businesses need in order for them to continue succeeding in our city.
If Los Angeles County were a nation, its economy would be the 19th largest in the world, home to more than 244,000 businesses, with more minority and women-owned businesses than any other in the nation. What are some of the ways LA is focused on equity and closing the gap for Latino-owned businesses?
You know, Los Angeles is a great American city. We export everything from, rovers onto Mars and movies around the world and everything in between. It's also one of those great centers for commerce and trade with the Port of Los Angeles, our airport. And so we're trying to connect more American businesses that happen to be run by Latinx population to more of the global economy. And in doing so, create more local jobs. During this pandemic, thanks to help from the White House and from Congress, we've spent nearly $60 million in direct grants. And we couple that with new zoning and making it easier for people to have sidewalk dining, to get architectural design help, which many of our business community doesn't always have access to, and making sure too that they can get access to technology through something called LA Optimized, which is free help to get connected to the web, digital marketing, social media, and those things that will provide growth in the future. But it's true, Los Angeles would be a G20 country if we were independent. So the size of our economy is literally the size of a nation. And we use that to connect with markets around the world. We're the second largest city for most Latin American countries. In fact, for instance, with Mexico, we're the city with the second most people of Mexican descent, including all the cities inside Mexico. So after Mexico City, it's LA, then you go back to Mexico for number 3. So for trade, investment, tourism, commerce, we notice that so many of our immigrant-owned and Latinx-owned businesses aren't doing any international business. So working with Department of Commerce and others, we're connecting our population with the world. They're already connected to the world, but now we're connecting their business to the world as well. So we're very excited to see these programs and to form a network around the country. When half of our population is Latinx in Los Angeles, that means that we all can find those Latino, find those immigrant, find those Hispanic, businesses and opportunities that really can be an example for the smallest town in the Midwest to the largest cities on the East Coast and West Coast, and making sure that we're part of the globalization in a positive way for all of our residents.
Unfortunately, many of our restaurants, because of the nature of the pandemic and how the virus has spread, have been some of the hardest businesses hit, and our retailers as well. What has Chicago been able to do to support these diverse communities and these, sort of brick and mortar retail businesses, including restaurants?
Well, I'm going to pick up on, I think, where Mayor Romero really left off. We've done many of the same things. But again, in partnership with our various restaurant partners, listening to them, what their pain points were. As you know, the hospitality industry was probably one of the hardest hit They were the first closed, and in some instances, the last to open. What we did is really stand in partnership with them and listening very closely. I'm not going to say that we always agreed on what the steps forward were, but we were listening, we were in dialogue, so we did a number of things. We made sure that we got some of those loans and grants out to our restaurants. We also did some of the very same things that Mayor Romero advised, really placed a huge emphasis on pickup and made a number of series of marketing campaigns to support small businesses in that regard. We were giving discounts for people who were going into small businesses and neighborhoods. I made a personal effort during the pandemic to be out in neighborhood restaurants, picking up and what we could eating in. In addition to that, we really expanded the opportunities for outdoor dining. Over the summer of 2020 and into the fall. And then, you know, as neither of these two mayors knows, but I know very clearly, it gets cold in Chicago. So we started thinking really late summer, early fall about what we could do to continue to capitalize and really expand the dining rooms, even though we were concerned about indoor dining. So we actually issued an outdoor dining challenge. And we've got submissions from literally all across the world. And we picked a number of those ideas. In our restaurants, no shortage of creativity there. We had igloos, we had, I'm forgetting the name, but it's a Japanese style of eating with heated tables and heated blankets. They were extraordinarily creative. And what we talked about then this year, again, to borrow from Mayor Romero, is that we did a lot of things in 2020 out of necessity, but we kept a lot of these things in 2021 because people really liked them. So if you come to Chicago, all across our neighborhoods, our downtown areas, you're gonna see a lot of al fresco dining. And we've made it very festive. We've strung lights, we've closed off roads, and it has this kind of European feel to it in dining areas all across our city. But we just wanted to make sure that we were giving our restaurants and our bars every opportunity to really recapture lost revenue and make sure that they were keeping people employed, but also keeping people entertained. And these programs have just been so well received all across the city.
Mayor Adler, you've been a repeat supporter of Support Latino Business Day. Can you share with us, in your own words, why you believe it's important to uplift Latino-owned businesses in a city like Austin, or quite frankly, any other city?
It's certainly something that's really important and especially important to us culturally in our city. A large part of our community is the Latino community, and it's growing. The demographic trends are real clear. But yet at the same time, you know, historically there have been burdens and obstacles and challenges in so many different ways that have really made the flourishing of these businesses more limited than they should otherwise be. And even with that, it's exceptionally strong in our city. So a lot of what we're trying to do is to really focus on those burdens and those challenges. You know, Austin has more startups per capita, I think, than any other city in the country. And part of that is because there's a real premium in our city for people to take chances. There's a greater tolerance for risk taking in our city culturally than in many other cities. That said, when you can give people childcare, when you can give people access, you can help minimize and lower those risks. But ultimately, I think the reason that you want to uplift Latino-owned businesses in the community is because those businesses just have so much to offer and are so important in so many different ways, not only for the businesses themselves, an important function and services and that they bring to the community, products they bring to the community, but also the contribution to a diverse tapestry and fabric in our city that really gets reflected in the quality of life that we all want to enjoy. I'm going to need to take off, but I do want to wish everybody just an absolutely wonderful Support Latino Business Day. And Antoine, I appreciate you and the SBA really focusing on this issue, inviting me to participate with my colleague here.
Thank you for being with us. Really appreciate it. I'd like to, if I could, with the mayors, pose a question. I'll start with Mayor Romero. As the first Latina mayor of Tucson, it's clear that you and your city have blazed a trail for women in politics and leadership in the city and state. What advice do you have for Latina entrepreneurs or leaders generally? And feel free to speak, personally with your own message here.
Thank you so much. Well, it is truly an honor to be the first Latina mayor of the city in our history. And it was about time. But what I would, and I'd usually tell other Latina business leaders and Latina, even girls in our community, that we have to make sure that we elbow ourselves in to decision-making tables in every area of business and life in Tucson and Arizona and throughout the country. And so for me, it was in public service, but we need to do the same in every area of life, in educational institutions and business institutions throughout. And so keep focused on what you feel is important for you, your family, and your community, and ask questions, find mentors and supporters. And for me, it was both men and women that supported my thoughts and my opinions and my dreams. And arm yourselves with information, because there are a lot of resources out there that can help you. So for small business owners, and by the way, Latinas are 6 times more likely to create their own businesses in the United States than any other group. So we're breaking barriers in terms of the amounts of women, Latinas, that are creating small businesses in our communities throughout the country and creating jobs. And so if you have any questions, the resources are out there. We need to elbow our way into the decision-making tables and just keep at it. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes dedication, but there are a lot of people that are willing to help and lend a hand to help see us succeed. So that's usually the advice that I give girls and women throughout Arizona and the rest of the country. Just keep at it, believe in yourselves, and take advantage of the resources that are out there. And SBA is a huge resource for Latinas and our families when it comes to creating small businesses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And similarly, Mayor Lightfoot, your background is similarly impressive. Having a background in law, having attended law school, and then rising up in a big city, Chicago. Any words of advice or wisdom for particularly women entrepreneurs or leaders that are trying to find their way in space? And I'm particularly thinking about in a really big city, in a really dynamic and huge marketplace like Chicago.
Well, I'm going to pick up on, again, the themes of my sister Mayor Romero, because I think she's really summed it up quite well. But I would say a couple things. Number one is there's always going to be people who tell you you can't. Ignore them. Believe in yourself. And that self-belief is going to be critically important. You got to have a real strong sense of where you want to go. You got to make sure that you've got the resources. Build that team of allies around you, because you're going to need that from start to finish. But never let somebody tell you that your dreams aren't possible. I think that's critically important. I also think it's important for women to really lean into the other network of female leaders and entrepreneurs. You know, unfortunately, it's still the case, and I think our country, we're socialized to see other women as competition because the window of opportunity that opens up is so narrow that it feels like a fight for other women to get through it. And I say this in every venue that I'm in, whether it's young girls, young adults, or older folks like me, you can't look at other women as your competition. You've got to look at ways in which you can network and come together and support each other. That's a critical thing that's important. I know that from really kind of climbing the ladder at a large international law firm, you got to reach back and bring somebody else along with you. And if when you do that and you pay it forward, that's going to yield dividends for the next person who's also chasing her dreams. But I think those two pieces of broad advice are really important, and I think have served me well. I'm honing advice that's been given to me by other women who have really been the pioneers in the workplace. I'm old enough to really be the beneficiaries of some of the first women who were really out there as leaders in spaces where you never saw women, So I really think that, as Mayor Romero said, women are really leading. There's a reason why all these studies show that women entrepreneurs are really leading the charge when it comes to being entrepreneurial, opening up small businesses, having that staying power. There's a reason why banks and venture capitalists and other financial organizations are really investing in female entrepreneurs. Is because we have to work so hard, we have to play by, we're judged by a different set of rules. So when we succeed, we also make our whole network, and importantly, our families succeed.
LA County has the largest Latino population of any U.S. city with close to 5 million Latinos. What lessons can you share with other cities around how beneficial it is to foster growth and economic development with all small businesses, including Latino-owned and minority-owned businesses?
I think the central lesson that we learned from this pandemic is that we all aren't connected to information equally, whether that's literally an internet connection, whether that's access to banking and to capital, whether it's knowing how to procure a loan or get involved with government procurement of contracts. We all spend a lot of money through cities, and we have to make sure those get to small local businesses. We're opening a new portal in Los Angeles that we'd love to share the code with any other cities out there, aided by our federal partners, to be able to make sure that small businesses, women-owned businesses, folks that are disabled veterans, and people of color are able to get those contracts that are local tax dollars being recycled. I spoke about LA Optimize, getting people connected to new ways of digital marketing and contactless payments that are a lesson also from this pandemic. But we also have to make sure that we're talking to one another. And I want to thank this administration for bringing us together to say not only is it important to support small and local businesses, disproportionately owned by women and people of color and Latinos, but it's important to network with each other and to share how those small businesses can become medium-sized businesses and one day Fortune 500 companies. That gap, if we didn't hear that call for racial justice in this past year, if we can't see it on the streets, and if we don't see the growth of our economy depends on the growth of Latino businesses and Latino employees, then we won't see a future as prosperous. On the flip side, if we do, and we help a sidewalk vendor to one day be a brick and mortar owner, if we can see the way that we have to have business centers locally in communities where Latinos and immigrants live, then we can see America's prosperity not only roar back, but roar back leading this world and bring more prosperity to this country than we've ever felt before.
This has been an insightful, incredible conversation, and we're so glad that we have advocates in cities for our small businesses like yourselves. I want to thank all of our viewers for joining us today to celebrate the contributions of Latino-owned businesses, to talk and learn from these mayors, and to help us kick off Hispanic Heritage Month with a conversation about supporting Latino and small businesses.